Welcome back, and joining us now is Aheesh Singh from MP9 Asset Management for a look at what's played out on the market scene. Aheesh, thank you so much for your time today. First things first, how are you navigating markets at this point? I mean, one day we're in the green, the next we are in the red. Of course, this is against the backdrop of the current conflict playing out in the Middle East that has revived fresh inflation fears.
Yeah, look, it's always tough, especially with higher volatility. But the one thing you got to do is take a longer view on things. I think in times like this, when there's uncertainty, you get two schools of thought. You either get investors who want to sort of protect their nest egg and they'll look to shorter term solutions, or you'll get investors that look at this volatility as, a chance to buy good long-term quality companies and assets.
So what are you doing? Are you buying the dip, or are you just sticking with your guns?
Yeah, look, I think being a long-only manager, we always look for a chance to buy good quality businesses.
All right. Let's shift focus to some of those good quality businesses. The banking sector, always comes out tops when we talk SA Inc. And banking earnings kicked off this week with Nedbank earlier. I think it was yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, or Tuesday. But let's look at FirstRand. They're out with half-year earnings today. Earnings up 11%. The SA business quite strong, but of course the vehicle commission case over in the UK hasn't been resolved. Just your analysis on the numbers we got out today.
Yeah, look, Ntaleng, solid set of numbers from FirstRand. The last time we spoke on Stockwatch, we spoke about how banking companies in South Africa now have a better balance between non-interest income and interest income, and that's what you're seeing here. I think the market sort of shrugged off what's happening in the UK, but I think overall solid numbers from FirstRand.
Just your thoughts around monetary policy moving forward and how that could possibly impact or rather filter through to something like interest revenue. I mean, there's been some analysts throwing the word interest rate hike around, and I'm wondering if that's even possible at this point, or whether we're just going to see the SARB just hitting pause.
Yeah, I think, look, it's a tough call, right? We're coming from a point of having inflation drop quite well over the last couple of quarters, and it would be interesting to see how the SARB now combats this potential spike in inflation. I think if the uncertainty carries on the way it is, you're definitely going to see a bigger spike in inflation, which is something I don't think South African investors were expecting to see this year. So it'll be an interesting one.
And listen, I've been banking on another interest rate cut. I mean, we didn't get one in January, and most of us were hoping that would come through in March, but it just seems like that might not be the case, considering the current global economic backdrop. All right, let's move over. Yes. Anything you'd like to add there?
I think, look, there's also one more thing, right? So this is being driven by crude.
Yes.
But I think it's more around, it's not that supply is uncertain. It's just we don't know. It's the timing of that supply that's a problem. So you have to wait and see.
Yeah, let's let it all play out, Aheesh. Let's take a look at now Impala Platinum, really cashing in on the higher platinum group metals prices. Prices aside, though, how did that miner fare operationally?
Look, it was a solid set of results. You didn't see much coming on the production side. I think there was only a 1% increase in production.
Yeah.
But what did help them was the platinum prices, right? And you saw good free cash flow generation, them swing into a net cash position. Although you did see that there was, I think it was a 10% increase in operating costs as well, input costs. So you can still see some cost pressure. And the only time they'll be okay is if PGM prices do stay where they are. And as you indicated earlier, the management does guide that there's still a medium-term deficit on the top 3 PGMs. So who's to say, but those prices seem to be stable, even though there is a lot of volatility in the near term.
And talking about the volatility, interesting to see that share price is down 7.5% today. But of course, I'm sure that's on the back of precious metal prices pulling back in today's trading session. All right, quick before we get into your stock pick, let's take a look at the private education players, both out with updates. Stadio and Advitech both forecasting a jump in earnings. Now, these players are quite interesting, Aheesh, as they've continued to outperform even in downbeat economic conditions, further showing that South Africans deem education quite important, especially looking at our current public schooling system, public university system. Your take on those updates, and perhaps you can speak to the defensive nature of that sector.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think South Africans tend to prioritize education for their children, and it's quite noticeable in both the performances of those earnings, right? However, I think the biggest distinction, someone may look at the results of or the trading statement of Advitech and Stadio and notice that Stadio grew at a much faster pace than Advitech. I think it's important to note that both those businesses are in different phases of their cycle. Advitech is a much more mature business, and Stadio is coming off a lower base. Yeah, but I think in a cycle or over a business cycle, definitely education businesses are more defensive, because I think when South Africans are going through a pinch or when there's a tough time, education is typically the last thing that they'd want to substitute in their household.
All right, let's get to your stock pick. Where do you see value at the moment?
So Bidcorp's a food distribution business that operates predominantly in Europe and also in emerging markets. Solid cash flow, stable margins. If I'm not mistaken, the return on invested capital was 12% in 2016 and has now grown to around 17% in 2025 last year. So there's definitely earnings accretion in that business, and it's a good long-term company to hold.
So Bidcorp, one to watch. Thank you so much for your time, Aheesh, and taking us through trade this evening. That was Aheesh Singh from MP9 Asset Management.